I won't have to do this next time, but just welcome, I guess, everybody, to the second Citizen Budget Subcommittee meeting for 2025. Any person that would like to do a thought or an invocation and or lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'll lead us.
Okay.
We have a flag somewhere.
Oh, yeah, we
Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do you want to do a thought or invocation?
My thought is I'm glad to see residents involved. It is, when we
Heavily.
started this 3 years ago, we weren't sure what would come of it, and I think it continues to morph into a better and better thing every year, so.
Okay.
I want to
first-
follow that up real quick. Bill and I did get together
Okay.
since our last meeting, and I think our relationship is improving, so thank you. Phil.
I couldn't agree more.
We'll do the kumbaya thing later.
That's right.
Oh, we did it outside, the hugs, the kisses, the dance.
All right. You might. So first thing on the agenda is to choose the subcommittee chair. I think it was evident that, and we try not to have one of the council be the chair. So each year we've had someone different. Last year was Steph, and I think there was someone that wanted to volunteer. I don't remember who that was, but
Well, I was asked by another committee member if I would do it,
I am.
and I'm happy to.
okay. So any issue with Mr. Swanson being committee chair? If not, then we're gonna. Gavel
Speak
that.
up, Brian.
Oh, we'll be speaking of you and I, plenty. I don't want to be the chair because I'm too much of a rookie.
I'm looking forward to it.
So basically, and I've kind of been filling on some of the other stuff that's ancillary, but it's just leading the meeting, leading the conversation. So I will definitely hand that over to Phil on that. Just one last thing on the minutes. We're not really putting them online. I think we're noting them. I'm giving them to Joyce. So I don't know what, to me, it's more of a, what did we do? And so was there any issues or anybody had any corrections to them? I didn't get anything, so.
I didn't even look at them. Is that necessary? Do we have to post them and keep track of all that, or is that
No.
something we can avoid?
We can avoid it because this isn't an official
Okay, let's
committee.
avoid it, my opinion.
Yeah, I want to
Not waste
document it for
time.
myself,
That's
so,
fine.
I mean, if anybody else, I don't mind continuing to do that.
And we'll keep it as part of the city history. It just doesn't have the same level of formality.
And we're on Zoom and YouTube, correct?
Correct.
It is on YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
have that record. Anybody that wants to know what happened in the meeting can go back and watch the meeting if they so choose.
What I'm saying is redundant, why waste the time, but I understand.
I ain't watching 2 hours
No,
of
I'm
thing
not
if I
either.
want to find one little bit of information. Not that I don't love watching YouTube. Anyway, so, okay, I'll tell that story. So then I hand it over to Phil.
Okay, thanks. Before we jump into the active agenda, we've already gone through the consent agenda. Before we jump into the active, just a couple of housekeeping items. One, we have a pretty dynamic group here of pretty smart people and with a lot of questions, right? We all have a lot of questions. Order is going to be important for us to get through our meetings timely and also to get the questions answered when it makes sense to answer those questions. So the only thing I ask is that if you've got something that you want to say or a question you want to ask, just raise your hand so that you can be called on. Otherwise, we end up talking over each other, and that's the only little housekeeping item that I have. Some of the questions that get asked, the answer might be, we're going to be talking about that in 2 weeks when the X department comes in. And we'll be able to answer that question more thoroughly when we're under that department. So that might be the answer, and just ask for your patience as we get through this. So agenda item number 3, questions on current budget year and overall city budget process, including questions related to documents emailed to the subcommittee. Brian, I know you've got questions, so let's start with you.
Okay, I've got lots of questions.
Okay.
My first question goes back to last fall where I ended up here now. John at the city council meeting presented and told how we need to do a 10% tax increase. to fund blah, blah, blah. Most of us got up and complained about it. Then the council followed up and said, yeah, we thought long and hard about it. Oh, and John also in his presentation talked about how we need to hire another person. I don't recall what department it was for. But that was the idea. It was like 120 grand or something to hire one more person, as I recall. And the council got up and said, each one of them said, yeah, like all of us got up and said, no way. I said, do 3%, not 10%. The council then followed up with, we've got to do this. We thought long and hard about it, blah, blah, blah. And then it was approved. And then afterwards, I tried to pin down Blake, and I pretty much all you guys listened. I said, this person, and Blake said to me, he said, you know, if we need to fill more potholes and fill more, you know, more street repairs, we've got to have this extra person. And I said to Blake, nobody's complaining about pothole repair and street repair. So my question is to you, John, that person that was hired, how much pothole repair and street repair have they done? Or was that an administrative person? And if it's an administrative person, why did the council, and I said to Blake then, I said, this is a bait and switch. John says we need to hire a person. You say it's for pothole repair. I said, that's not what John said, but it's what you're using to get me to be quiet. So who was hired? How much pothole repair, or did I get some bad information?
So I think this is my impression is that the additional person was a police officer.
I don't remember. It was a 10% increase to hire somebody.
But it was the treasurer. It was the finance department. They split a half person to do that. And I thought that's what it was. I can go look it up.
Well, we did add it was the accounting position that turned into our payroll position.
Okay.
And so it wasn't a street person.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Then I'm fine with that. This is what I'm trying to get information. So do you remember my conversation saying about the bait and switch, about he wants to hire administrative, and you guys are telling me it's going to be a pothole repair person? Did you hear that part? Okay. So
I was like, get rid of the parks.
my question then is to the council, and since you're representing the council, don't tell us citizens that it's going to be a pothole repair or a sewer repair or a water repair when it's an administrative person. I think that's a fair observation. And I feel like I was lied to by specifically Blake and some of the other council members. So.
To be honest, the biggest problem is the budget is a complicated thing. And if you hear something that's not necessarily correct, you're gonna go with it because that sounds like what you think it is. And it might not be right.
Specifically, what do you mean?
Well, no, Blake said, well, this is for the pothole repair. I don't remember any of that, but that's what he remembers. So.
What I remember in that council meeting, when that budget was approved, there was conversation. Mayor had made a suggestion that perhaps a lower increase could balance the budget. Blake and a couple other council members in that meeting mentioned that they felt having the little bit of extra would allow us to do more potholes, more repairs here, do some, give a little bit of extra that we could use to do more things. I don't remember it being that we would hire a pothole person, a streets person to do that. It was, we would have money that we could do more with those kinds of things.
To a certain extent, I agree, but Blake specifically said to me,
right,
we're gonna.
I don't.
It was said, the conversation from Blake to me was basically, I don't want to argue with you. We're gonna fix potholes. And I said, Blake, nobody is gonna argue with pothole repair.
Sure.
Nobody here is complaining about an increase
Sure.
if you're actually gonna fix roads. But that's not what John Call presented.
And I think getting it back to the city budget process that, is number 3. What I hear you saying is that in the process of council making the decision say we take last year where mayor was saying we could do it for X percent, council decided to go for a higher percent. The communication needs to be a lot clearer about exactly what that extra is going to be used for. That's what I'm hearing from you is that you heard one thing in the meeting, an individual council member you were reporting said something. What I heard in the meeting is different. What council member Pulver remembers is different. What Sandy remembers is different. By we, I mean the city needs to be more clear about that.
Agreed.
Okay, instead of 7% increase, we're going to do a 10% increase, and here's what we're going to do with that extra 3. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, but like I said, if you're gonna, no citizen is gonna complain.
Right.
If for some of the basics.
Right.
Okay, and like I said, so for a council member to say, you know, this is what it's gonna go for, and like, he said it to keep me quiet, and then I kept arguing with him, and he said, well, come get on the committee, and here I am. So, yes, bottom line is, if you're gonna raise.
So it worked, I'm sorry.
It did work, it got me here,
No,
but.
Right.
But I think, and that goes to one of the things I think we wanna do is make sure that whatever the change is, like you're saying, you know, define it. And if there is an increase, why, and where is it going? And make it simple. And I think some of the whole budget process, and I've looked at some of the other cities, they have a 2-page citizen budget, you know, review, as opposed to this whatever multi-thing that, you know, takes you years to understand. And if if you're just my wife, I will use her as the example. If she doesn't understand it, you're not gonna get most of the citizens to understand it. So
Yeah.
you need something simple, keep it simple. If not, you know, with the swiping that we have nowadays, it's more than 2 pages, you already lost most people. So-
And I think that's a great idea. With all of the budget discussions that council has, there are so many things that get bounced around, and by the time they get done, you know, everything's been talked about, but it isn't necessarily clear, right? There isn't a unified answer, and I think that citizen budget sheet would be a great thing that we can pass out. Here are the increases. Here's the why behind the increases. It won't necessarily, I think, make people happy about the increases, but it can in a more unified and a more clarified way, help people understand this is what the money's being spent on.
And then spend the money on it.
And then spend the money on it. That's correct.
Okay, I got another 30,000 foot level question and I posed this to.
Is it a process question?
Well, it's is there 10% of the budget that if it was a private enterprise?
Yeah, I
pose
think
that?
that's a good process question, because municipality is different than business.
So this is
typically.
really for John and for Mayor Berube here. My background is small business, and as a small business owner, my goal is always to, you know, trim waste, save money, blah, blah, to get it to the bottom line. There's a profit, because ultimately that profit goes to me. Okay, municipalities don't have that, but as the mayor and as the city administrator, I'm making the blind, uneducated argument that there's probably, and I would say businesses try and operate on a 10% plus net profit. Without understanding all this completely, I'm saying there's probably 10% in this budget that could drop to a bottom line if it was a profit and loss. You'll disagree with me, okay? But my question I'm gonna say the two most important people, you know, was the city administrator and the mayor. If there was 10% to be dropped down to the bottom line, and if it went to you guys, where would it come from? If you could trim 10% off this budget and it went into your pocket for your cars and your vacations and your buildings and whatever, is it there? And could you do it? And you may not have an answer now, but think about it. Because again, if you're the city administrator and you're the mayor, that's, I feel like, a reasonable thought process.
I can give you my impression, which is, and any employees who are listening to this is not actually what's happening, but what you would do is focus on programs you can live without. So you could eliminate, and I'm not saying, but here's some programs that cities don't have to do. We don't have to do recreation programs. We don't have to do park programs. We don't have to do code enforcement. We don't have to, there's an argument we have to have a planning department, but we don't have to plan in the future. And so what you end up doing is, if you eliminate that 10%, which for us is $1 million, give or take, you start eliminating the level of service for certain activities, and some of them entirely. Like if you eliminated all of code enforcement staff, then that would fall on the police department or someone else. And now you're stretching those other areas thin. But those would be the type of things is I would look program and eliminate programs, because I think if you tried to trim every budget 10%, it would be very problematic.
Okay. So again, but it sounds to me like the answer is yes, it could be done. If it benefited you personally, just like if I'm a small business owner and it benefits me personally, it sounds like it could be done.
It could be done. I hate to say that I would do it if it meant I could buy a Ferrari, just because but that, you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather work and have my job be manageable than cut 10% out of the budget.
I think one of the other considerations is, as we start getting into policy with that kind of a discussion, because it's whether or not we have a recreation department, whether or not we have parks, whether or not we have code enforcement, those kinds of things, really comes down, we can eliminate anything, right? We could pretty much eliminate anything at any time. The question is, should we eliminate those things? That becomes a policy discussion that council has to make. Whether or not we eliminate recreation, right? That becomes a policy question. There are savings if we did eliminate it. There certainly are dollar savings that could happen. The question that council and mayor have to wrestle with is that in the best interest of the city overall, budget included? You know, it's that philosophical discussion again. Is it in the best interest of the city to not have a recreation program? And there's more than dollars and cents that's involved in that question. And so that then becomes a policy question that is shoved off on our legislative branch, where they make that policy. And one of the things I'd like to do as we go through this as a committee, and John, if you can help me keep track of these,
Yeah, I'll come back. I'll do your thought. Then I'll go back to
is
John.
that there are these kinds of policy discussions that we can encourage the council to have. We aren't going to make that decision, but we can certainly say, okay, council, as a committee, we think there are areas within the city that we can live without. We want you to have that conversation. We suggest you have that conversation. And then it's up to council to decide, yeah, we're going to have that, or they have it and we keep it or we don't. Mayor, you had a comment?
I'm just gonna answer your
Yeah,
question.
I want to hear your thoughts
I'm
on
not a
that.
committee member, I'm just sitting back here, so, I think to Phil's point, you have to balance efficiency versus effectiveness, right? And as you know, I come from the business world. I think Phil can tell you, and John could tell you this. I look at things, first of all, there's three approaches I use. What are you doing you shouldn't be doing?
Mhm.
What aren't you doing that you should be doing? And the third thing is, whatever you decide you're doing, are you doing it in the best way? So for instance, I've approached this from not eliminating, and there are things we could eliminate. For instance, if we wanted to eliminate the senior citizen center, that'd save us probably $100,000 a year, right, John?
Yeah, give or take, yeah.
But is that fair to, is that something that we should have for our senior citizens? As Phil said, you can eliminate recreation. Is that fair to the kids that are growing up? But here's the approach that I've tried to take, Brian. And I think John and Bill could do this, is when we look at things, for instance, we took a lot of heat because, we had a discussion, do we really need an events coordinator, or can we do that a better way? Can we do that a cheaper? We were probably paying between the parks director and the, events coordinator. Those two positions with benefits were probably 300,000, John?
Between 250 and 300.
And we said, so we stepped back and we said, is there a different way we could do that? We looked at it and said, there's some duplication there. The public works guys are doing a lot of the same things. There was just duplication. We said, is there a more efficient way just to combine that? So we did. And it seemed to work out, fine. We looked at this and we said, okay, do we really need to have the parks building open and the public works, or should we have a place where people can come and do all their business in one place and utilize, if we're running at a 65% capacity, could we change that to 100%?
Sure.
Could we maximize that? The thing we're looking at right now, and this is where I think we've got to look at it, is first thing is, are we doing it in the best way possible? For instance, on the 18th of this month, we're meeting with Pleasant View with an attempt to avoid this duplication in policing our two cities. Just initially, between the two cities, there's probably about a $300,000 savings there, because why do we have to have two police chiefs? Why do we have to have two sergeants overseeing 4 patrol people, we could have one sergeant seeing 5 patrol people. So I think, Brian, if you know me and feel, I'm a kind of a conservative hawk on money. In fact, people say I still have the first dime that I earned in my life.
We've seen it framed in your house.
Yeah, so in any event, that's kind of, I think some of the things we need to look at is the 3 things I talked about, but I've kind of been concentrating on, as I've looked at this, there's not a lot of fat in the programs we have. So you have what Phil said, you can just decide what programs you don't want, or you can say, okay, we want these programs, but is there a different way to do it? Is there a more efficient and effective way to do that? Now, I've talked to a lot of people that understand policing better than I do. Their answer is, there's absolutely no reason why this shouldn't take place. But there's these egos. Somehow, there's always this competition between North Ogden and Pleasant View.
Well, it's ego and it's pay, because you're essentially gonna combine a job and eliminate one. Is that correct?
More than one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then someone's gonna lose their job, and that could affect it as well.
What would happen, for instance, you wouldn't have 2 chiefs, right?
Yep.
And you probably have a chief and an assistant chief. But cause they wouldn't have to hire a chief. They have 1 detective right now. We could move that detective into ours and have a 3-man detective department with people proportionally paying their share of those things. So that's the kind of the approach I've looked at, because no one has stepped up that I'm aware of and said, let's cut this program out. Now, if the council decided to do that, we figure a way to do it. But there is an effect on
Sure, I understand that.
what that is. But the approach I'm trying to take is consolidate, maximize the resources we have, prepare for growth in the city by saying, okay, how can we automate as much as possible? Because, we're at half of our build out, right, John?
Yeah.
And we're not going to double city staff just because we're doubling them. We've got to figure out how we can do that better. But, and Phil started touching on this, and I don't want to prolong this, but frankly, my opinion, just my opinion, is that city governments have historically looked at things from a year, we'll deal with that 15 years down the road when we need it. No longer term planning. And so what we've tried to do is put ourselves in a position that when we know these things are gonna happen to us, that we have the money to do that. So we've kind of taken a more longer term plan. And, Phil will tell you, this. I probably given John and the rest of the staff crazy here because I'm the CPA by trade. And so, I get into the numbers maybe more so than any other mayor has. I don't know, John. Or Phil,
I would say so.
you've been around. Other
Yeah,
than
for the
10 years,
most-
maybe.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the mayor situation. And, we tried to correct things and move forward. But I think what it boils down to is exactly what John and Philip said is, okay, you want to cut some things out, identify that. But the things you keep, are we doing it in the most efficient way we can? And, I'm not proposing this, but I'm saying if somebody came up with a better way to outsource something, then we can do it. I don't think there's any aversion to doing that. But when we've got, RFPs, for instance, on outside maintenance of our parks, it came in, because they have to make that 10% profit, right? And government doesn't have to make that 10% profit. So every time we've put something out from RFP to see if it's, we could do it better than somebody else, we've either found out we can't do it better than somebody else, or we can do it cheaper. But that doesn't mean there's stuff out there.
And I think your 3-question philosophy, Mayor, has served us well over the last 5 years. I know that council before I was off and now with the new council, that's a regular question. Do we need this? And if the policy answer is yes, we need it, then the next question that I see council asking regularly is, are we doing it the most efficient way possible? And they have found some efficiencies. John, since in the last 7-ish years, how many gains would you say we've had and, where we have not filled positions or we've eliminated positions that we've determined that were not necessary? My brain remembers 6 or 7.
There's probably been 6 or 7 position eliminations, but maybe 3 additions that were more critical. So
Okay.
probably about 4 positions
Okay.
eliminated for efficiency.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
follow-up question to that then, if you've eliminated three positions, in theory, the budget would have gone down because you're paying less. Has the budget gone down or has the budget increased?
No, it hasn't gone down. I can tell you why.
Right?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Phil, you can back me on this point. Just like when you're in business, you gotta retain employees, right? Good employees. The city council for 17 years, is my understanding, not increased property taxes. When I came in here and, it wasn't me, the council agreed to deal with this, is that our employees were substantially underpaid.
We increased the pay and.
So what we tried to do is take some of the savings and give it to a retention program that we could use. For instance, and this is part of the problem too. We were behind in police pay, and then police pay just inflationary just took off because everybody has demands. So a police officer was making $19 an hour, I think, when I started.
Yeah.
And
2017, a starting officer was 17 an hour.
yeah, because of that, demand for police officers, we had to substantially increase their pay to do that. So that's why the budget didn't go down, is, I joke about this, you know, it's been I don't know if it was caused by me being the mayor, but we had the highest inflation we've had in 40 years, right? So we were behind and we had to catch up plus, right? We've had, one of the worst winters we've had in 30 years. I mean, so we've tried to reallocate.
That's fair enough. That's a good answer to the question.
We've had to reallocate, but if not, the budget would have been, you know, because the savings that John just mentioned were 3 or 4 people, right? Instead of having to have the same 3 or 4 people, then we dramatically increase property taxes. We use that to right size and to right pay.
That's a good answer.
I would say, John, our pay was, you know, our philosophy is to pay at the 50th percentile of the market. You know, not
Right in the middle, perfect.
50th percentile, but what we had substantial catch-up, if I recall, John. We were probably at what, the 40th percentile maybe?
Depends on the positions, but an average is 60 to 70, yeah.
Yeah, over, you know, so we had to right size and catch up all this. And, you know, frankly, we kicked maintenance in the city down the road and I'm not being critical of anybody because they were simply, their heart was right. They were trying to save money and not increase taxes, and there was no negative reason to do that.
It was the general fund maintenance. So utilities have always been fairly well taken care of. It's the general fund maintenance that was
Yeah.
being pushed off, like playgrounds, yeah.
You know, a lot of our park equipment playgrounds were like 25 years old. The average life is 15. We had to get on a rotation schedule. I won't get into the accounting issues, but you know, our police department, we weren't depreciating to buy the vehicles that they came. We had to catch all that up.
So who does that responsibility fall back on? Why wasn't somebody doing that? Why wasn't somebody paying attention to that? Why, and I'm sorry, John,
No, you're good.
as the city administrator, I feel like it falls on you and I feel like it falls on the mayor, but he's voted in and out, so.
So I agree that, and if those things had not been brought up to the council every year. So a good example is people would come and say, we need a new playground because it's 20 years old. The council would say, we need a new officer more, and we don't want to raise property taxes. And so so those decisions, even the motor pool for police, those were council level decisions. That doesn't mean that there aren't things that I could be doing better, but I'm just saying that those kind of critical components always came to the council, and the council said, well, we want to go this direction.
Okay. Well, and
And-
Brian,
and-
just to your point, you know, in defense of John, he's in a very political position. He has to follow what the council says. Now, he can tell them you're nuts, you're crazy.
Have you
but
ever told them they're nuts or they're
Yeah, he
crazy?
does. He tells me that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But
It's-
he's basically a political appointee. And so when the council says, because I've heard him say, you might want to consider doing this, and, you know, it's just a recommendation, because he has no vote, and he's a political appointee, so to me, you know, I wouldn't put the whole blame on John, because he brings up stuff, but it's the council, the guys that have the vote, that make the decision.
I understand
Moral of the
that.
story is, make sure you have qualified city council members.
Yeah.
That understand the bigger picture.
And I'm gonna just throw in there real quick, and again, sorry, John.
No, you're good.
I am coming at you.
This is
That's
giving
fine.
some relief.
But then I have one more statement that I'm gonna let you guide into the budget, okay? Again, my assumption is, I haven't seen payroll, that as a city administrator, you are one of the highest paid employees in the city. Therefore, more is expected out of you. And I understand where it can get political and problematic, because if you tick off whoever appoints you, you can lose your job. I understand that. But again, if you're a highly paid employee for us citizens,
Mhm.
you should be doing this. Now, one of the things you said a second ago was that, and I said, you know, if there's 10% that could be left over went to you, you said, and correct me if I didn't understand it, you'd rather have more help and less stress on you there than have a Ferrari. So so you'd rather have more help and have less responsibility. Yes, so you have more help, less responsibility, and make less money. Okay, that concerns me, because the attitude is, I'd rather, you know, pass the buck and pass off work. As a business owner, you can't really do that. It
Well,
always falls down.
Oh, hold on a
So,
second. The point of the city manager is to be not doing everything. His
Agreed.
point is to delegate everything. He needs to be managing as a quote unquote CEO,
Agreed.
right? So he shouldn't be sitting there, you know, doing clerical work or whatever. You know,
Let me
the
give a
whole-
little bit
yeah.
of history. One thing you gotta remember about John is that he fills two roles,
Yep.
right? Which is
You and I discussed
about
this.
150 with benefits, 180,000 a year that we save. Because we have, in one person, we have a city manager and a city attorney, which makes his plate quite full. And on the city manager side, he relies on, and I think rightfully so, the expertise and the knowledge of the department heads. Now, historically, some of the catching up that we've had to do over the last, what, you've been in 5 years, Mayor? 6?
50, I think.
50, it feels like 50, yeah. But at 5 or 6 years, something like that. What we have come to realize, and I think this happens in any business maturation or any municipality maturation process, that you realize, oh, wow, okay, we weren't doing that right. We should have been. A lot of that came when we had the same audit group, auditing company that audited us for decades, forever and ever and ever. And as a council, the council here a number of years ago decided, you know, we're going to put this out for bid. And we ended up going with somebody different. When they got done with that audit, we learned a whole lot about the city that our other auditors had not brought to light. We were depending on them to say, you're doing this right, you're not doing this right, you're missing this, this is good. We were getting a clean bill of health every year when we weren't as healthy as we thought we were. That started, and that happened right as mayor came on in his first term. And we realized at that point, wow, we've got some changes to make. We had issues with how we were doing depreciation. We had issues with, saving for this. And that was a historical bleed over from decades of every year. And you heard me mention this at the beginning, sales tax would go up 7 to 12, 13, 14%. And so every year council would look at the budget and go, okay, we had last year's budget, sales tax is going to go up 10, 12%. We'll increase the city budget by 8%, and then we'll put the rest into capital projects. So there was this year after year after year, the revenue kept growing. It just kept growing and we would spend a portion of that revenue and it was habit from decades. As that started to tighten up and we got into the pandemic and all of those things that really tightened that revenue up, then all of the, I don't want to call them mistakes, they were just, as you get smarter and you have different people in different positions, you realize, oh, we were doing that wrong. Or we could have been doing it better. It wasn't the most efficient way. We start realizing all these savings and we're catching up. Go ahead, Mayor.
So we get back on the
Sure.
agenda here, I just want to say, we don't have a full-time mayor.
Right.
And basically, right or wrong, Brian, the approach has been, John is the chief operating officer, just like in a company, you need somebody that's looking forward that can do the planning, right? Because if you get so engaged in the day-to-day details, you don't look past the end of your nose. And I will tell you this, and I'll stand by it, I could take a lot of criticisms. We have hired a couple extra people in this city because we had basically one person that was controlling everything and was doing half-cooked job, frankly. And the morale in the city, employees, John, was, I thought, what have I done here? I just got out of a job, now we got another one. But when you have somebody like a human resource director that can change the culture and get people re-engaged, you get more productivity. So we have, with the scalpel, I think, looked at those things and said, okay, what do we need to do to plan for the future? But John is looked at as the chief operating officer. So he does delegate a lot and he relies on those people, but his job is to kind of keep us focused on the future. And I will tell you this, each mayor has their different approach. Bye, Sandy. Thank you for coming.
She'll be back.
John would tell you, he depends on the personality of the mayor. And he's had mayors that have just said, we're not doing anything. John just hold the fort down. We've had mayors that said, here, carry my briefcase and don't ask any questions. It's all depending on the personality of the mayor. Now, my approach has been, I've got a lot of improvement to do is, John, I'll give you my advice. I'm here if you need me, but don't let me get in your way. I'm a part-time mayor, right? My job is to represent the city primarily out in the community and other things, but, John is the chief operating officer and you need somebody that can plan. So with that, I'll turn you back to the agenda.
So where I would take it,
With the addition of staff and the increase of wages that, 21 through 23, I think were the worst years that we had to do that. What kind of retention has that gleaned?
My opinion, for instance, I used to say our police department was the training department for other agencies. We were churning like crazy. Now, have we let some people go at our will? Yes. But I think retention has been really good, frankly.
Prior or after these changes?
After we made the
After-
adjustment, culture and-
Yes, for the police, a good example is we still lost people, but usually there was a mutual agreement. But attracting has been easier for us. We're typically 95% full, which is pretty good for a police department right now. In the other departments, Public Works, since the changes, their retention has been, way better. I wish I could quantify it, but they might have lost 5 people a year before and now we might lose 1 to another
Something
competitor.
good to share in your newsletters.
It saves us money, right? 'Cause we
It's
don't have to
saving you
retrain.
money. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
spending some money, but you're saving some money and you're saving a ton in training.
Would Katie know that?
so to close,
Yeah,
close
she has
out
been.
item number 3 for city budget processes. If we take the mayor's 3-legged stool, right, where are we doing it and we shouldn't? Aren't we doing it and we should? Those are really policy questions that rest with council. Where I see this committee being most effective is in are we doing it the best way possible? Are we looking at it? And I think if we focus on that particular aspect, we can recommend changes. We can also recommend that council look at some of the first 2 policy. should we be doing this? Should we add this? But I think we should keep our focus. Mike, tell me what you think on, are we doing it as efficiently as possible?
Yeah, is there a better way?
Is there a better way? Right, okay. Brian, what do you think?
I agree with you.
Okay, okay. So let's move on. Anything else on basic budget process? Just an understanding of basic budget process.
Steps that goes through,
Oh,
does everybody understand
well-
that?
And everybody understands how property tax gets levied to the city, right? That number, that percentage that's next to your little thing that you calculate to figure out how much goes up and down depending on Weaver, what they say your house value is, but it also dictates that the city never gets less than the year before.
Or
So-
more than the year before, other than new
Right.
growth.
So so that percentage goes up and down even before North Ogden does anything. So it could go down on a continual basis, which it did for those years. And that's what happened is, and then all of a sudden, we needed to be not at, I'm making up numbers, 0.15, but it needed to be at 0.2 for us to make things work. And so that's the thing that got kind of out of balance. And being an engineer, you like to see things on a nice even keel, not the spike thing that, anyway. So that's something to look at that it took me a while to go figure out is that, but again, we don't have any control over that. You know, it's based on your valuation of your house, which again, we don't have any control over. So it can go up and down quite drastically depending on what happens year to year. So, but it doesn't change your taxes. We change your taxes, but
But the process, 'cause I'm a little bit confused, I don't want to prolong things, but do we understand the process that it goes through? The department heads submit their budget, the yellow sheet. It comes in, it's, looked at by the finance director and the city manager. They put all the things together. They propose a budget that goes to, the mayor will usually look at that, make his comments, but it ultimately goes to the city council. They'll look at it. In the last couple of years, they've had to make some tough decisions because I think last year, when the budget came in, it had a deficit of $500,000, if I recall. And you have to figure out, okay, how are we gonna make this work? And then ultimately, they present a budget. If there's an increase in taxes, they have a truth in taxation hearing, but ultimately they approve a budget that's submitted to the state. That's kind of the process, I believe, that
Yeah.
that goes through, but the council has final say. But there is a difference between business and government.
So coming from the business side of things, all the department heads would be given a target, put your budgets together, don't exceed this percentage.
Right.
Do we do something like that?
This year,
We
they
do.
were told there'll be no increases.
Yeah.
We told them to hold it flat.
Hold it flat, this year, but the difference being is, I usually come from, okay, expenses are paid out of revenue. So you have to determine what your revenue is, right? You don't say, okay, here's all my expenses, now you say, here's the revenue I've got, and then you work, from that point down. Sometimes there's a tendency, say, here's our expenses, now we're just gonna.
I have another question on the budget
Yeah.
too. On the business side of things, we would do 3 and 5 year projections. As far as growth, income, all those type of things, do we do something similar to that with what we put together here?
If you're able to figure that out on a governmental side, write a book.
because the
And
sales
you
tax
will
law is
own-
killer.
You will own 100-acre parcel on a beach in Maui.
There's some things though, that I think you have to forecast the hits that are coming. Cause Pine View,
Well, but he's talking revenue side, right? Or no?
more
Just-
more expensive.
Everything.
Oh, then
So
no,
the
then
expense side, yeah.
that's a good segue.
And we will, and we can talk about this at another meeting in more detail, but we do have this capital improvement sheet, which shows here's the stuff that we have that's on the radar for being done in the future. And we've got it for all of our capital, meaning this is the general fund page. We've got water, sewer, street, storm, and fleet.
These are more capital related.
Yeah, and then we do look at expenses to see what trends are coming. But we haven't currently like taken the planning department and said, hey, what are your office supplies gonna be in 5 years? Like, we haven't done that sort of a projection. We typically are looking about 2 years out on that, trying to understand what's it gonna be this year and next year so that we don't end up behind. But a good example is, we told them to hold it flat unless there was something absolutely necessary. And a good example of something that's kind of necessary is there will be a request for some new servers for the city to keep up with our rotation for our servers. That number changed 3 weeks ago when the Chinese imports got a 25% tariff added and Dell jacked everything up. Okay, well, anyways,
Yeah, whatever it was.
there was an increase on. Yeah, there's an increase on Dell products that is substantial, and so that'll be something that will come to the council as part of it. Exceeded our expectations from last year as we were trying to do that. On servers, we do about a 3-year rotation. So every year we want to get a new server or two so that they're new every 3 years, so they don't end up.
And one thing, when you
under.
talk about capital, because in the business world, you capitalize it. In government accounting, there's an overall budget. I don't even know what they call it. It's all encompassing. They don't even depreciate at that level. But these capital things that we're used to calling capital expenditures in government, they're expense. A lot of them are expense. Instead of capitalized. This is the craziest dang thing I've ever seen.
That's a good segue to item number 5 on the agenda as we're looking at upcoming meetings. In the past, what this committee has done is we've looked at the schedule for city council when certain things are going to be presented to city council. So let's say Parks and Recreation and Public Works is going to be on a particular date. What we've done in this committee is we look at the yellow sheets and we look at their specific proposed budget a couple of weeks ahead of time before that date, before it gets presented to council, so that we can make whatever recommendations we're making for that department before it gets to city council. Does that make sense? Does that sound like an acceptable way to go ahead and plan our meeting schedule out? So what we'll do then.
But I don't know if we want to do that again? Because we've done that 2 years in a row, is going through yellow sheets in grave detail, if they're not changing them. I mean,
I'd agree with that. If they're not changing them.
but I mean, I'm not saying don't review them, but I don't want to step through them during the meeting. I would say review the yellow sheets outside and come with some like top level ideas, but I don't know if we want to waste time. I don't know if we need to rehash that again.
I think what you mean by it's not that they're not changing them, is that the amount of items found that would make a significant difference is maybe not worth the effort in meeting.
In the meeting, correct.
So
I'm not saying don't give them to the members and say, have them look at it, because fresh eyes, I mean, we have at least 2, maybe another, that fresh eyes that, yes, that's the whole point of this committee, is to look at them.
I would like to see those, 'cause I'm new to it, but I do have a question for you, for John, you and Chris on this. With these department heads, I know the game where you put a budget together and you make a big wish list and you give it to somebody else and they get to approve it or disapprove it. You aim for $1 billion and they give you $500 million and you're happy. With the department heads, are they pretty reasonable? Meaning, do you guys go through them, or does somebody go through them and say, look, dude, you're not getting new chairs every 3 years. Your chairs can last 5 to 7 years type stuff. I mean, are they reasonable, or are their wish lists kind of silly sometimes?
the place where for example, the police is very reasonable. And what I mean is, if you look at their operating budget, their equipment is a very small portion, less than 10% of their budget. And they rotate cars every 5 years, which is kind of at the upper end of when you want to get police cars in. Yeah, usually 3 to 4. It depends on the department, but we've been able to get 4 to 5 out of them. But there are some departments that do have nicer equipment. That's typically going to be the enterprise funds, but that's because a good example is we did the meters, the radio meters readers on our, that's a mouthful. And that has saved us from adding positions for the past 10 years. So we're usually doing it with this forward thinking, how does it save us future investment? But it doesn't mean that there's not, I hate to say that there is extravagance, because it's not like people are driving the nicest like leather cladded pickups,
Let me ask
but
you a different question. Have you told some of these department heads, no, you can't have that? Or
Yes.
Who does that? Who is
Yeah.
responsible?
Yeah,
for it?
so-
Okay, so which department heads are getting the most no's? Because that says to me that person wants a bunch of wish lists that may not be necessary.
So-
That's a fair question.
and that would kind of segue in. It's usually Public Works that gets told the most no's, and it's usually talking about capital equipment expenditures, snowplow trucks, backhoes, skid steer, stuff like that. They're usually told it's not this year, it's next year. Make that piece of
Okay.
equipment work another year.
Okay.
But usually the hard thing about our equipment is we use it and we don't abuse it, but we don't put as many miles on a dump truck as other jurisdictions or as other, like a contractor would. But all the pumps and the lines and everything wear out to where it's more costly for us to maintain it than to buy a new one. And so sometimes we'll buy a dump truck, like we had one that was 20 years old, we just got rid of, that had less than 100,000 miles on it. But it wouldn't run. But that's who gets told no the most is Public Works, I
I'm
would
just
say.
wondering if there's, like, I played the game where you ask for the stars and you get the mountain, but is that going on? And it sounds like it's not. I'm just wondering who is keeping them in check, and it sounds like it's being done.
Usually it's the mayor, finance director, and myself, and even Dave sometimes, because he does it with his own supervisors and says, wait, you can't have
Yeah,
that.
I've sat through some of their meetings and just,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things too, is that, do we really need this type of thing versus, like something is working, but like when you come to the snowplows, hey, yeah, it's working, but it's only working 50% of the time.
Sure.
And it's costing us not double, but
Sure.
a significant amount of downtime, and the guy that's working overtime to fix it when it's snowing 3 feet. I mean, that's the kicker, is that when you try to, sure, it's still working, but if it's, just like planes, same thing, when do you get rid of them? B-52. I mean, good heavens, the thing is ancient. A10, same thing, but they keep rehabbing them and keep lengthening them down the road. But at some point, you either have to completely redo it, which becomes a new
We understand.
piece of equipment, but
Yeah, but what happens, Brian, well, I give you a couple examples, because I think that makes more sense. We had a lift truck recently. I mean, it was really unsafe. You could see it wobbling when it got up there, and it was like 20-something years old. So they came to us and they said, we need $240,000 for a lift truck.
Why are they not budgeting that into their budget, that they're gonna need it?
Because they were always
3 to
told,
5
no,
years.
next year.
Next
But
year.
they can still save 5 to 10%, can't they?
So
So here's what happened. Let me
Okay.
finish here, because I think this will answer your question on savings. So they came and they asked for a $240,000 lift truck. City council approved it. And we asked the question, we said, well, wait a minute. Actually, somebody called around and said, hey, actually just went out on the internet and said, what trucks are available out there? So we started asking some questions. And at the time they submitted their budget, because it was coming out the end of the pandemic, that's all that was available. But because we asked some questions, we saved 65 or 70,000 bucks on that truck. John will tell you the other thing, just so you know, if somebody's watching this stuff, is when we sat down and we saw this huge renewal on our insurance.
Mhm.
You've probably seen it on your house and your cars, right? We get the same thing. So we sat down and someone happened to ask the question is, well, what's our risk? Do we need this kind of deductible? We go through it. How much did we end up saving, John?
just so this is property, this isn't healthcare, but we ended up saving $23,000 on our vehicles by adjusting our deductible.
And on the buildings, I mean, it seems like it came in, we ended up paying like 80 grand less
Yeah.
on the proposal. So I don't want you to think that nobody's watching this stuff.
Well,
I think what you'll find is that over the last 8 years-ish, that a culture of frugality has been has been grown in the city. And that's come because there have been city councils that are willing to say no, because we've had mayors that are willing to say no, because we've had city managers and finance directors that when what looks, given the economic environment that we're in a given year, and a request comes in, long before it gets to city council, you've got a city manager and a finance director that are saying, there's no way. There's no way that's happening this year. Just take it right out of the budget. And because of that, we've hired and we've promoted really good people that are conscientious. And that's not always an easy thing to do, but we've got a great group of department heads. And the other is that you have a council and a mayor and a city manager and a finance director that have that frugal mindset. And everybody knows that, so that it's kind of like the kid knows, well, mom will give me $5 for allowance, but dad's only going to give me $2.50. Well, I don't get to ask mom anymore, so I'm not going to ask for $5 because I know dad's going to give me $2.50. It's that kind of a mindset that everybody knows that it's being watched on multiple layers. The mayor's looking at it, finance director, city manager are looking at it, direct department head, city council, budget committee. There's all these layers that are looking at it to keep that frugality in there. And because of that, I don't think we get exorbitant asks anymore from the departments. They're very frugal. And we've even had times where, they on their own come and say, you know what, okay, we really need that new dump truck. And then, 2 years ago, right, they asked for that dump truck. I think 3 years running, they asked for a new dump truck. And at least one of those years, they just pulled it off themselves and said, look, we can see that this is not the year. And so, yeah, I think to your fundamental question, we have really good people who are not asking for exorbitant things. And then we have multiple layers that are inspecting that to make sure that it's within where we are economically.
It just cascades down, frankly. I mean,
So like on the lift truck, looks like that's up for 26.
we just got it.
So you just have it.
What is here is we end up doing it on a lease, so we're tracking the.
What I was gonna say, one of the things that we used to always challenge people on was, how many times are you using that lift truck? It's a very specialized piece of equipment. Can you go rent it?
We look at that.
Go down west of the freeway, pick it up and
Yeah.
rent it once a month
Yeah,
or
I
once
looked at
every
that.
2 months.
And that's a really good question, Mike, because a good example is our street sweeping. We did an analysis and found that it was actually cheaper to hire a company to do our regular sweeping, and then we still have our sweeper that now the life of it will extend. Instead of 5 years, it's 10 years. And so but you're spot on that those are really good questions to come from this group. Sorry, I'm bumping you, but because those are things, to the mayor's point earlier about the lift truck, a resident or a council member came to the council meeting and said, hey, it seems like that's too high. And then it helped us go to Public Works and say, double check. And one of the things they found is the vendor, which was a state contractor. So there's some, they were giving us an insulated bucket, and we don't do power line work. So we didn't need an insulated bucket. And so there was things like that just took the price off. And so this group, from a staff perspective, we really hope that there are things like that are, hey, it's okay to say, did we look at this? Did we check this? Because we will ask, and sometimes the answer is, yeah, we've looked. But a lot of times it'll be, we haven't looked at it that way. This is a diverse group of individuals for that point to help us see it from a different perspective.
A number of years ago, we had Public Works come to us and say that for what we were spending to hire an outside agency to crack seal the city, we could purchase our own crack seal equipment, train somebody to do it, and we could do twice as much crack sealing for about 60% of the cost. And that came directly from the department. They could have just said, yeah, we're going to keep contracting it out. Nobody likes to be out there squirting that oil around. But they said, no, we can train it. We can train one of our existing employees. We can get the equipment. There's a couple of other municipalities that we were buying, at least at that time, in bulk. The seal, those bricks of stuff that you throw in there. And so we get that from the departments coming up all the time. Mayor, you had a comment?
I was just gonna say that it trickles down, whatever the attitude is. And I think you've got particularly Councilmember Fulmer. The first question he always asks is how are we gonna pay for this? Right, where's the money coming from? But conversely, recently there's been people on the council member that have said, I'm more than happy to double property taxes so we can get a rec center, right? And so what I would say is, you know, it's very important who you elect, and, you know, you screwed up electing me, but anybody else, you gotta be careful that they have some conservative fiscal responsibility, because they've got that, three people can determine the future and the expense in the city. Three people.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at, agenda item number 4, overall goals and direction of the subcommittee. From the discussion that we've had today, what solidifies in my mind is that third, are we doing things the best way possible?
I have a thought on
What,
that.
yes,
So this goes to the last time we met, what the mayor said. I brought up the snow plowing, living up in the cove, we should be paying more because we're using more. Mayor brought up sewer, we're being charged by the value of the homes versus usage. Is the direction of the city a pay to use direction, or is it we just all pay?
first of all, on the sewer side, that's not the city, that's the county.
Right, but he's fighting it, saying they're charging is based on value
Right.
versus based on use, so
Right.
he's going the same direction I'm going. Pay more to use more, pay less to use less.
The
And I'm-
city's overall goal, I would say, and direction has been over the last number of years, maybe half a decade, has been usage pay.
Okay,
We've done that with the tiering of the water, not only
Yep.
just from a usage standpoint, you know, you use
Yep.
over so much, you pay an exorbitant,
okay.
but also the cost to get it up the hill, and that's
Yep.
why we're
Yep.
going to make a recommendation when Public Works comes in that, hey, is there a way that we can look at tiering the snow plowing?
Okay, so as that trickles down, Mayor brought up the senior center.
Right.
Are the people that are using paying for it? Or am I paying for it? Cause I've been in there one time for a wedding. The pool, I brought that up last time. Are the people that are using it paying for it, or am I paying for it? All the questions, all of these things, same the rec department, you guys have made comments that we're going that direction. Are we actually going that direction? In my opinion, is that's the way it should be. If you want these amenities, you pay to use it. On the rec center idea, and I've had gnarly arguments with some of my friends who want the rec center. And I told them, you go buy the land, you go build your rec center, you charge those who want to use it, and you get the reward. And he goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I said, there you go. You answered your own question. So
the conversation we had at lunch, much of that comes down to a policy question that only council can answer.
then that's my question. Is that the direction we're going, where it's a pay to use versus everybody just pays and those who use it get a discount?
It depends. That's my famous answer. I love it. But that's
You
true
could be
though,
an
because there's certain things that you can do that fairly easily, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, if you're playing flag football and, you know, do you want your 84-year-old grandmother to subsidize it? Not really. I mean, the only real true thing that we're subsidizing at this point is the staff, any staff time that's used to organize it. Everything else, equipment, yada, 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 in my opinion, should be. And that's so they kind of looked at that this past year and said, oh, yeah, we could probably get that more in line. And they did. They raised stuff. There was a fear that, oh, well, everybody's going to go to Pleasantville. I'm like, okay, you know, to me, it's more about being fair
Yeah.
to the citizens as opposed to worried about losing, you know, people, you know, or losing the ability to have softball. Like, you know, to me, it comes down to fiscal responsibility. But I think to the other side, you know, the pool thing, because you can go both ways. It's something that everybody wants, and then we're only subsidizing this much. Is that worth it? You know, whatever the difference is, where the ticket sales don't come to whatever, then you gotta eat that. I mean, you look at other municipalities, was it Brigham City, I think is like $100,000 they'd have to dump in every year.
And we're dumping 80 or 90, so.
Somewhere, yeah, so it's about that, you know, so we're not out of range. So-
I looked into that one a little
Uh-huh.
bit, and Farmington, Draper, Sandy, all charge more for non-residents.
Correct.
Up to 40% more.
Right, and that's the thing I think we're working on, and I think that I thought it had been changed, but I think that's something that we can work on, but
We used to do it,
Right.
and then we switched it back when we raised the
Raised the
price and trying to focus on the users pay for it. Because, and the goal, the recommendation from finance at that point was, I think,
And we-
11.25
With
for
the
an entry fee.
yeah.
And we went to 8 or 8.50.
So that'll be another discussion as to, at least in my mind, to raise it up or definitely raise up the non-citizen. That 100%, we need to do that. So, so really but again, I mean, your point is the parks. We don't need parks. We got plenty of hillside to go to. So, that becomes a policy, but it's also, everybody can use that. So, yeah, everybody should probably share in the cost of a park. So that's the way I think it really depends, because if you're talking specific, yeah, but if you're talking general, where everybody can benefit, now.
Is there any state statute that you have to have a certain amount of park for your city?
Don't have to think it's zero, yeah.
So John, I want to push that on you as a city administrator. Can you guide the department heads to say, look, this is the direction we're going. If you're using it, you need to pay for it. So rec, figure it out. Pool, figure it out. In 5 years, we want to have that $100,000 deficit to be zero.
If possible,
Okay, well, it's
Right.
possible.
well, maybe.
Figure it out. Give them, I mean, it doesn't have to figure out in a year, but we've been 10 years losing 90 to 100 grand on the pool. We haven't done any progress there.
We have made progress, not to where we wanna be. But John will tell you, how long have I been saying, John? The goal is that thing's gotta pay for itself.
Let's see, was it January 3rd of 2020?
Okay,
Yeah.
5 years, what's the progress you've made?
We paid off the debt,
Yep.
got rid of that. The lawsuit,
With revenue from the pool paid it off or from taxes paid it off?
RDA fund,
Okay.
which I don't wanna get in that discussion, but that's a separate
Yep.
thing not paid for by, residential.
Operating costs, we're still, how far off are we?
I think we got down as low as 30,000,
That was our best year, yep.
but it used to be as high as
67.
Where are we at now? In here somewhere, I highlighted
And
it.
it's hard to, what I asked him to do is give me a 12-month projection because it overlaps. It overlaps.
Yeah, it's
good.
Budgets,
Fiscal years, yeah.
make fiscal years.
Okay.
Now, what I was told, and I haven't seen the numbers yet because we're going in the second season, is it was about $30,000 for the complete season this year.
30,000 in the
May
negative?
and June of
Yeah.
last fiscal year, July, August of this fiscal year.
Okay,
It's projected
So
to
if
be
we're-
about 30,000.
so we've made progress at 30 grand. In 3 years, let's have it to zero.
Well, that's-
So,
The
So
problem,
here's the other piece that you have to remember, Brian.
Yep.
Is that all of this, it isn't just a city manager or a mayor saying this is the direction and the philosophy that we're gonna go to. Because the moment, we have an election coming up this fall, right? The entire makeup of council could change. And if the council changes and the majority of the council says we are not going to be a use it, pay for it city, then everything changes because council is the one that makes those decisions ultimately.
Okay, on that hypothetical, I understand it. John, can you put that information out to the public to say, look, the reason our taxes go up is because the council and the citizens want more stuff, therefore you gotta pay for it. And the council was being more fiscally responsible, now we're not. Let's throw the information out there. I mean, rather than give them a 500-page
City
budget,
manager has to be careful not to play politics
Okay.
that way.
who can do that then? Me? Okay,
You, residents.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of the reasons that we have this committee. It's one of the reasons that when I was on council, Chris does a great job, being on council now, of begging and pleading with the everyday citizen to be involved so that you know what's going on, right, Sandy? What questions do you have, Sandy?
I'm good.
I know you're good. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm just absorbing everything right now.
but, and Brian needs to hear this probably, but the other thing is on the pool is the depreciation that has not been done on it right now. And the mayor's talked about it. And when we signed off on fixing stuff on the pool, we were basically signing up to 300 grand a year. Depreciation added to the budget. It was a solemn vote, but everybody said, yep. So I mean,
Okay,
that's the
sorry.
kicker, is that it's not $30,000, it's 300 plus whatever.
There you
There's no
go.
depreciation in that.
Okay,
Yep.
so to my point then, we're so far off.
Yep.
If we're essentially losing 300 plus 30, so we're losing 330 a year. Can we say we're a financially conservative group and we're trying to be financially responsible if we're essentially losing 330 grand a year on that pool? I say no.
And I think the ultimate answer to that question, when you're dealing with a democratically elected group of people, the answer comes in the election. And when the city as a whole elects a group of people that says a majority of council members who have the philosophy, one side or the other, if the elections hires and the majority of council is a more frugal group that says it's going to pay for itself, then that's the answer. Because that's what the electorate chose. If they choose the opposite, that there is a council that says we're good with subsidizing $330,000 a year for the value, right? Not the dollars and cents, but the value, the community value of the pool, then there's your answer. It really comes down to the electorate, what they choose through their elected officials.
I agree with that 100%. I
Right.
do think though, the hard numbers should be more available. That information should be made
True.
available, because that will
And-
affect.
But hold
True,
on,
but you
because
have to-
in
there's-
general fund, you don't depreciate assets.
Right.
You see no depreciation on there. My question was, okay, we happen to have this RDA money to retrofit the pool to where it should
Make it
be,
more efficient.
but that ain't gonna happen next time.
Yep.
In 20 years from now, when it has to be done, where's the money coming?
For 10.
Right? Well, hopefully it won't be 10, but it could be. But understand, that's one of the accounting things. General fund assets aren't depreciated at that level.
So,
It's never
Should the
been.
pool be pulled into a separate thing?
and that's a recommendation that this committee can make, right? Is there a better way to be doing it?
Fund like water, sewer.
Enterprise.
And that can be something as we discuss the parks and recs that will include the pool. That is something that we can debate, that we can talk about, we can flesh out, and maybe that's a recommendation that we make to council. Is that the pool be segregated
An
or
enterprise
separated
fund?
in some way into an enterprise fund where proper depreciation can happen. And those future needs are accounted for. I think that would fit right in with our goals of, are we doing things the best way that it can be done? And then allow council to make that decision.
Yeah.
Statutorily, by ordinance, does the state government allow you to have an enterprise fund of that nature?
Yeah, we could. There would be some things that would trigger accounting wise. Cause then not only would we have to account for or identify depreciation, we would have to fund it, which means that we would have to inject the 300,000 a year. So right now under general fund, the council can kind of say, we don't have to fund it.
Unfunded.
But
Yeah.
Okay, so let me back. So Phil, you and I have debated this before, and you keep lumping in the pool with Parks and Recreation, but in this budget, they're already separate.
It's a subset of parks and
the
rec.
personnel,
So it's
you
like
don't see personnel in the
in
pool.
parks, we have parks as a separate GL from recreation. And with this last year, with this goal to have the aquatic center operate like an enterprise fund, we've even stripped it out a little bit more to
Okay.
try and
Okay.
create that
So-
transparency.
I think we need to put that out there though and say, look, it's, the honest truth is this pool is losing 330 grand a year. Similar to, I saw in there, there was another water feature or something going on there with a $1.2 million budget item. Is that what?
That's the RDA, that's the money the RDA is injecting into the pool to get the new
No,
playground liner.
I think he's talking about the waterworks part.
That's it.
But that's not $1.2 million.
Okay, I saw
Well, it
something.
could be 1.2, but a lot of it's
Okay.
funded.
What,
but-
what is that? And again, is it gonna be similar to the pool?
It's
to
a
where it
parks
should be-
related.
No.
It's a free for all, not free for all. It's not a fee based, it's a park over by the old Public Works building.
And we can get into those details when we're in the
Yeah,
Parks Department.
Okay, and this is a question I wanted to ask you before.
Sure.
I come into the meeting.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, one thing on the pool, I don't want to kind of just harp over, but how much, and this is a gray area, how much does it bring to the city in other revenue from sales tax? When people go to the pool, they go to other places, blah, blah, blah. So that's, I mean, it's not something that's in there. I mean, we're being black and white about it, but there are some esoteric things that really aren't in the numbers. That how does it, and that's kind of the software we've been talking about and doing some market analysis to figure out, hey, is this pool viable? Does it increase even more because we get all these people in here and it does a whole bunch of other things. Little Caesars goes through the roof every time the pool's,
And the
stuff
deeper
like-
dive on that is then we're subsidizing private enterprise.
No, but we're getting
subsidizing
sales
the
tax.
pool, which generates
True.
private, profit over at Little Caesars. I understand the sales tax, but it's a deeper dive there, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay,
Did you?
I just want you to keep emphasizing, if you get rid of the pool, if you get rid of recreation, how many more police officers are you gonna have to hire? Cause those kids are
Kids are
running
gonna be
around
wild,
getting in
yes.
trouble. They're fighting with their parents, the police are being called to their homes, it's all tied together.
No, and that's a very good point,
We
I
need to-
think. Yeah.
I mean, I agree, there's things that have to be cut, but that needs to always be kept in mind.
well, and you also,
There's always a con.
we've talked about that there are
Economy.
policy decisions that have to be made. And when you start looking at, okay, we're going to eliminate this portion of recreation, you really have to ask council at that point, are we going to have recreation at all? Right? Because you can't, I think it would be unfair to residents to say, okay, this section of residents, you don't get your recreation subsidized in any way, but this section you do, and this section you do. A question that I've asked for years when the question about do we just get rid of the pool has come up. My question has been, do we also get rid of the senior center?
Or do those who use it pay for it?
And we've had that discussion and the answer has been repeatedly, no. I mean, Mayor will tell you how many times I've suggested
But then
a
you pay-
membership fee
But there is stuff that is paid for. From time
through
to,
donations, but not for the individuals.
but there was like for dinners and stuff. I
No,
thought there was-
that's all provided by
Well,
the
so
county.
That's by the county, but
If they pay for classes, it goes to the Northview Senior Citizens, which is a different 401c3.
That's a 501c3. It doesn't go to the city.
I
but
got
let's don't forget this. Is we looked at it, we said, okay, who's using this thing? By the
Right.
city.
you.
Right.
And Bill challenged me to go to Pleasant View and he says,
That's right.
and so Pleasant View, for years and years and years, we're using that center and not paying a dime for it. We were paying the whole bill. So we did an analysis and found out about 20% of the people over there from Pleasant View. So we went to them and said, hey, our operating costs are about 60 grand at that time. We need $12,000 from you.
And they paid it.
They paid
They
it.
did, oh,
So,
that shocks me.
The point that I'm trying to make here is though, that the overarching discussion is a council discussion from a policy perspective.
Yeah.
Is there value beyond dollars and cents to having certain recreation items? And as a council member, that's a tough one to wrestle with when you look at, okay, it makes sense to get rid of X, but then to be fair, we really should get rid of Y and Z and R and S. And then you have the entire community up in arms because everybody's saying, no, wait a minute, we expect these things as our community. And that's why sometimes it's harder than just dollars and cents. But the great thing about this committee is we can make whatever recommendations we want. And if that means this committee says, we think that X ought to be cut and Y ought to be cut and that ought to be cut, we can make that recommendation and then council gets to wrestle with it and deal with the blowback.
And Chris doesn't run next year.
I've got 3 more years for some reason. I don't know. Anyway,
Okay. We are,
Is there any other overlap with Pleasant View besides law enforcement? That we
overlap
could-
with,
Well, that we could combine
Our-
forces?
Our
Oh, right.
recreation programs work together. So they do flag football, we do tackle football. And it's different age groups and stuff. And then basketball, our teams play each other, baseball, our teams play each other. So there's some overlap there.
But in city services,
You mean like garbage and stuff like that?
Yeah, garbage especially, you know, combining
We-
with surrounding cities on refuse.
We've talked about doing hey, us, Harrisville and Pleasant View do a contract together for trash. And we all pick the same
Mhm.
vendor, and then in theory, quantity would give us a discount, but, it hasn't happened yet. We've talked about it a little bit.
And some of that is politically oriented. There's a natural, I don't wanna say natural, but some cities just see life as a competition with their neighbor. And they don't wanna do anything with us.
Well, and
And-
it's different options too, because right now Pleasant View is doing recycling, we're not.
Yeah, we're
So-
not, and I think, do they use
Recycling's
Republic?
cost.
They do now.
They do now, they were using Waste Management, right?
No, Robinson or something, but they got a notice that said, hey, we're not gonna serve you in 6 months.
Okay,
So
so
that's
there,
your
but there's
point.
always, to your question, Mike, there's always opportunities, and I think this committee would be remiss not to suggest those kinds of combining efforts to increase scale so that we get more favorable pricing where that's possible. But I've had a couple residents reach out since the Facebook post went out about next week's meeting on the police department. Yeah, shouldn't we include Harrisville? Shouldn't we include, you know, and create almost like a Northview Fire Department, but a Northview Public Safety Department kind of thing. So there's lots of things.
Yeah,
to
there's a
do.
reason why we didn't invite Harrisville on the initial
Right.
step. But to your point, we had the conversation, for instance, now that we're both with Republic, why don't we negotiate a contract together? Now, we're not sure the expiration dates are in line, but we could fix that. So if they've got 1 year left, we could maybe extend ours 1 year or vice versa, but garbage is a big one, because it's gonna be, I'm afraid the increase is gonna be substantial.
Huge.
But we're limited on the people that wanna do it, that's,
Yeah,
And that fits right in with, are we doing things the best way possible, right? The kind of the primary guiding force for this committee, are we doing things the best way possible? And so any and all suggestions, I think we ought to be
Yeah.
looking at them. So our next meeting, John, what's the plan for the budget discussion on councils?
So on April 1st, we will be talking budget highlights, percentages, revenues, salaries and benefits.
Okay, so that's just kind of an overview.
Yep. Then April 8th, which is right after that, we'll be talking enterprise funds and admin, which is
So-
not the whole building, but it is the whole building. Yeah.
So without spending this meeting in an in-depth review of the yellow sheets, I think it would be helpful if we come to the meeting before the 8th of April with you said it's the enterprise funds?
Enterprise and admin. So enterprise in this building.
If we-
Dates, weren't we doing Wednesdays, now we're going to?
Yeah, no.
I'm talking about council meetings.
So on
So that we can
the
do it
council
before.
meeting on the 8th, they're going to be talking about we'll be talking about the enterprise funds and the admin funds. We should review in our regular meeting, at least a week before that, we should have received the yellow sheets. Our homework assignment is to review those yellow sheets, come back with any questions that we have that we want brought up in that meeting, and then we can discuss that in this meeting without doing an in-depth dive into the individual yellow sheets. Does that make sense?
Is that possible, John?
So today is the 12th.
I can
2
probably
weeks would
send
be the
those.
26th of March. Do we want to meet on that day and pass out those yellow sheets?
I wanna throw in, some support here. And combine the questions. The comment of what we can do together, get better negotiating power. I came from a co-op, right? That's why we
You're
formed.
speaking his language.
That's why
I
we formed.
did the same thing.
That's why we formed, to get more buying power. We need our citizens to rally around it and push on that issue, because to Phil's point, some feel it's there's probably some in both cities that feel it's a competition. But there's things we can do together to avoid duplication and save both cities money. But we need that push from the citizens base. Because, you know, 3 council members can say, we don't like those guys, or. you know,
What's the feel of the citizens in Pleasantview on that?
on
you
the
know?
police?
Yeah,
Depends on who you talk to.
Well, you've got, I'm not one to waste a lot of time, so I've met with each one of
After
their
the
council
8th.
members and asked them. does this make
22nd,
sense
so
to
it's
you?
2 weeks later, it's 22nd.
The majority of their council members said, yeah, this makes
Okay.
like total sense. Let's
So
get the
we're going
details.
every
We have
2 weeks.
one who's very vocal
Okay,
without any, just immediately says, we're
that
not
means we
doing
can
that.
meet.
And it's been out
26th.
campaigning. Yes,
Excuse me.
so I'm
and then we
wondering
can meet
if
on
to
that
go to this
April
meeting,
meeting
we're gonna have
before
a
the
bunch of people that have been
22nd,
recruited. that say,
again before the 6th of May.
You know.
Okay.
Not their best information, saying, no, no, no.
No.
But I believe the police department is the one that's obvious, but there's a lot of things, to your point, that needs to be pushed. That really needs to be pushed. And we tried it with an engineer one time, but it didn't quite work out, sharing an engineer. Engineers are weird, so. Doesn't work out much with them.
So the next one would be the
Thing I don't know anything
ninth
about
for
engineering.
us, Wednesday the 9th.
But
Parks and
that needs
Police.
to be pursued. That's a, you know, these are points that
That would get us 2
need
weeks
to be
ahead, which
pursued,
we-
not just brushed
that would get us
aside,
2
but,
weeks ahead.
you know,
Mhm.
what can we do better together? You know, how can we negotiate better?
Yep.
Those
It's an
are-
opportunity.
I would.
So,
but I'm-
A proposed schedule. I'm looking at John's rollout here. So if we did enterprise funds and admin on the 26th of March,
Mhm.
we can have those because they'll be discussing that. We'll want to email those out to everybody the week before
For as soon as you
the
can.
I'll send them
26th.
sooner.
Yeah.
I think I can actually send all of the yellow sheets.
Okay.
I'll say Friday.
So that's great. We'll have all of the yellow sheets. Then on 3/26, we'll meet and we'll address questions about enterprise and admin funds. On April 9th, that will be a week and a half or, a little over, almost 2 weeks before the council talks about parks and police.
Parks and police?
Yep,
Police.
police.
I mean, I thought you said police, like, you know.
Oh, police, the police
Po-po.
department.
I know my hearing's getting bad.
What was that? Let me turn mine up. So that was April 9th,
The police is on April 9th.
police.
Here,
No, that's
this group.
for budget. It's with council on the 22nd. And then with council, fund balance and final budget priorities is on May 6th. So we would talk about that on April 23rd, 2 weeks after. So April 23rd would be the fund balance and final budget.
So what I would say is that any final recommendations would come before or be presented at that May 6th.
I would suggest that on the 23rd, we'd be looking at the recommendations that we want to come from this committee. We can look at questions that anybody has on fund balance and the final budget. And that's where we put together our presentation to council that would happen to council on their May 6th meeting, where they're looking at fund balance and the final budget. That's where we as a committee would make that presentation in that meeting and say, here's our recommendations regarding the final budget. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So your homework then is, John's going to have yellow sheets out to us on Friday. Start going through those yellow sheets. If you have questions on them, you can call me, you can call the mayor, because, just go to his house, knock on his door anytime. You can call John. And,
I have a question.
yes,
Can I get a printed copy?
Yeah.
Yep,
I don't
absolutely.
have a functioning printer at home. and-
Yeah.
Okay.
absolutely.
For which one?
The yellow sheets.
The yellow sheets. Yeah, we'll get you a printed copy.
You can't look at
You'll
your
take care
phone
of
go
that?
sliding back.
No, no, I can't do that.
Oh, I hate
Yeah,
it.
I print them out.
When you see the email come out, that'll let you know that the copy's
That
here
you
for
got it
you.
here, I can just pick it up.
Yeah.
Do
Do
you
you-
want a printed copy?
Of the yellow sheets?
Yeah, because
Okay.
what you emailed me, I couldn't open the zip file. I got
Okay.
one page open, but I was gonna say, because I'm still trying to understand all this stuff. Can you and I still go to lunch?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, I'll reach out to you tomorrow. We'll schedule a time.
Okay.
And
You guys are welcome to come too. I just.
are you good?
Yeah.
With just an electronic copy, or do you want to print? You're
I'm
good
good
with
with
electronic, okay. And I'm good with electronic, and if I have problems, I know where you hide.
Chris, I got a question for you.
You know what those sirens are for?
Sorry for the pool.
That we're wrapping up the meeting before 5 o'clock.
You just jinxed
Yeah,
yourself.
excellent.
We dig deeper into the budget in this meeting than count above.
No,
Depends who you're talking about.
Philosophically, yeah.
So
The first year, we definitely did.
Oh, my goodness.
We got to every single penny,
Mhm.
every penny.
So a good example is, as the liaison, Councilmember Pulver goes and sits down with Dave and his folks, and they will go through sometime before April 8th, the yellow sheets, the requests, and really focus on what are the new stuff, what are the big things. And he's one of the council members that, and they all do it in some form, but he's one of those that I think last year you spent all day over there.
I don't think it was that long, but it was enough.
He's an engineer.
Oh, boy.
There-
It's like he's
there
the
was
answer
a
for everything.
time
I don't know.
when
It's
council
almost like
would
a swear
have
word.
But it could also.
budget
be your
retreats.
excuse for
That's
everything.
true.
And we would spend 8-9 hours
How effective was that?
sitting around a table talking about, well, this is a 200% increase because last year we spent $1 and this year we're spending $3. And we would spend 3 hours arguing over a $2, literally $2 increase. And somewhere else where it was you remember those
It'd
days.
be a 5% increase, but it was $100,000.
But it was, and that would get glossed over because it was 5%. So
And the council members couldn't,
I'm just telling you how it was, okay?
Well,
The answer to
there's
your
no
question
training
about how
for this.
detailed the council members do it is it depends on the council member.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
every council member has all this information. How much time an individual council member and the mayor spend on their own doing homework and going through all of this beyond what's had in discussion at the meeting varies by individual.
yeah, that's fair.
And mayor spends more time than anybody, because I'm in all those meetings here in the basement with the finance director, me and him and the mayor and all of us together. He spends more time than anybody who's elected, I should say. Although I don't know how much time people spend reading it, but mayor's very.
Would you like to look at my graphs?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, if these guys come in flat, it should be.
It
relatively-
should be relatively simple.
It should.
Should be.
Though, like I said, it was, don't increase it unless you can articulate a kind of an emergency reason why. And I use the servers as an example. They went up by $6,000. Normally we spend 12 and now they're 18 or whatever it is. So.
Okay, so we have our meetings scheduled out through the meeting. So on
March 26th.
May 6th is when we will make our presentation to council as a committee.
Tuesday.
On Tuesday, May 6th, yeah, at council meeting. And then the following week is the week that council has to approve the tentative budget, May 13th. So the tentative budget is just that, it's tentative, it can be changed. It doesn't become solid and locked in place until the public hearing and council, if they approve the final budget on June 10th. So changes can still be made, but our presentation will be on May 6th. And we can, as we get closer, we can talk about who wants to be at the podium to give that presentation. I'm looking at you, Mike. Or Sandy.
Good job.
Whoever ends up doing that, we'll give that presentation, but we've got our next 3 meetings scheduled. So be prepared for enterprise funds and admin funds on the 26th of March. That'll be have your questions ready to roll so that we can go from there.
Did you want to add public comments to this? I didn't have it on the agenda.
Yes, is everybody comfortable with adding public comments to the agenda as a regular item, just in case we have a member of the public here? Anybody not okay with that? Okay.
4 online, I thought.
Do we have anybody online that wants to make a comment? Raise your hand. We're watching. Brenda, Kevin, Stephanie, Susan. Susan Kilborn. Go ahead, Susan.
I can't sit here without making a comment. You guys know that.
There you are.
There
Yeah.
you go. I just wanted to know, you to know that this was time very well spent by me, and I really learned some interesting things. And every time I tune in, and I wish I could shake some people to realize I get so upset with people who complain, well, I didn't know they were going to do that. Well, when did they ever talk about that? Or I never got a chance to say anything. I want to choke them, but I can't because then I get arrested. But I learned from you guys all the time, and I like what I'm seeing. I like the synergy you guys are building. That's all I have.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks.
Stephanie,
Hi, Stephanie.
there you
Can
are.
you guys hear me? Hey, Steph Casey, resident. I just wanted to comment, especially after my last week's comment, and just say thanks. This was a great meeting. I look forward to the future discussions. I think some good points were really brought up, and I could hear them, and I understand where you guys are going. And I look forward to listening to the rest of the meeting. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks for tuning in, Stephanie.
Yep.
Anybody else online want to make a comment? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we'll close our public comments then. Anything else from members of the committee?
I don't think I have anything to do.
Councilman, anything from you?
Just for open, transparency, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. So there, we have been conversing with, Kerry Wainsgard. He used to, and just weird synergy is the fact that he used to be my wife's dad's, anyway, they used to work
Sister's former roommate.
Well, and so I keep thinking of him, he's a dentist. No, he's a banker, because he used to, but his son is the Wainsgard that's over here. I go to him for a dentist anyway. So long story short, he hasn't been able to come to these meetings, but he's been making a crap ton of comments. So, been trying to go back and forth answering some of them, but his big push was, revenue stream. And I've been trying to, work with John to see, well, how do we answer that? Because really, when it comes right down to it, do you know month to month what you're making per se, in air quotes? And the answer is sort of, because sales tax is 2 months behind. So, month to month, you kind of sort of know what you're doing. But when, property tax comes, once a year,
Lump sum, yeah.
and, all this other stuff is smattering throughout, I don't know. I haven't gotten an answer back from what I threw at him to say, what do you think about this? Because it's a pain. And I sent him one of the sheets that Jamie puts together, that kind of the sawtooth thing of sales tax, to say, hey, if you can predict sales tax, good on you. But, because it gives some real stuff. So anyway, just wanted to make sure that people understood that he wants to be on the committee, but he hasn't been able to show up to the meetings. And I'm like, we'll see.
I've been writing, thank you for forwarding those questions to me. I'm writing those down, and as we, the questions that he was asked,
And for Mike too.
they pop in, yeah, from Mike's as well, Mike's email. As they pop into the various departments and discussions, I've been writing down and keeping track of those questions so that we can bring those questions up on their behalf. Mike, if you're not here or Carrie can't make it, we'll ask those questions so that they can be answered in the appropriate meetings.
Some good information.
Yeah.
So, and I think this has been the most, since the first one, the first meeting, the first year was pretty dynamic. This has been the next, not the saying last year wasn't fun, but it was, we were kind of doing maybe some of the same stuff that we did the first year. This is kind of.
Here's where Kerry, and I appreciate his question on that. But when you're in a fee for service organization, it's dang easy to project your revenue.
Yep.
It's pretty dang easy. When you're at the mercy, we don't know what people are gonna spend in the state.
Yeah.
We only get 1/3 of our sales tax revenue for what's spent in this city. The other 2/3 comes from what's spent in other cities that's allocated to us based upon population. So
And 2 months behind.
Yes.
when you're in
That's for
business,
sure.
you got a lot more control over the only thing we have true control over is property taxes.
Right.
kind of, sort of,
Because we,
yeah.
well, we do, because we set the amount of money we're gonna collect.
Yeah.
We said that, but yeah, when you come, I mean, in the grocery industry, you knew how much everybody was gonna spend and what the. But we have no, 1/3 of our revenue, our biggest revenue, which is sales tax. Is what people spend in the city. We have no control. They're gonna drive down the street.
There's gotta be a better way to address that, though. We got 100 years of history. Do we not have any, records of growth and expenditures? I
State
mean,
best economists don't.
do
Well,
they not try? Is
And
it-
they do. And the other issue there, and then we'll get to your question, Sandy. The other issue there is that the state at any time can pass legislation to change how that allocation happens. Which has happened in the past, so.
yeah, there was a huge dip a couple months ago in what the state said their sales tax collections were. And, if people quit buying the big items like vehicles,
Yeah.
appliances, all of a sudden we just get this information like, but the state this year is projecting flat,
Flat to negative, aren't they?
slightly negative. And we're just a reflection of that, but
Yeah, it makes it difficult. Sandy, your question?
So I missed the beginning of last night's council meeting. Do we have a new finance director, and will that person be able to participate with us, or are they just coming in with?
We
You know.
do.
we appointed you as the finance director, so I guess you have to.
Oh, you didn't
Let
get
me
that
get the
memo.
check first.
No, we do have a new finance director, but,
Yeah, I understand if someone new, they're not gonna.
well,
be-
he's a good egg and he doesn't want to leave where he is now, San Juan County, in a lurch. And so he's gonna be part-time remotely with us till May.
Till May, and then probably be full-time remotely through May while his kids finish up school and he finishes up his
And then
obligations
full-time
there.
here in June.
And Jamie is. she's
Jamie's gone,
completed?
so
But she will continue to help me with the budget. She won't attend the meetings because of her obligations, but she will help
Okay.
make sure that I don't delete something I shouldn't.
Okay,
On the
But we're
sales
in good
tax
hands.
reporting,
Yeah.
when we say we're 2 months back, are we working off December numbers?
Yeah, the state doesn't give us our
It's
allocation.
the state
2 months
that's-
after they.
Yeah, so the numbers we got on February 23rd-ish
December.
were from December.
Yep.
And the reason is they, basically the businesses make their payment the month after they receive it, and the state puts it all together and then they report it the following month. So it's just this kind of cascading delay.
it's crazy.
They can tighten that up if they wanted to.
It's crazy. Okay,
People report sales.
if there's nothing else, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you on the 26th.